I'll leave the kangaroo.
I can just leave the kangaroo again. So I'm not really going to speak too much. Just a couple of words, just to say thank you very much for coming along. Great that you've all spent the time, to come. Hope you all learnt a little bit. Also, just to say that obviously because this room was a bit live, I was a bit concerned about it with having the concrete walls. So I spoke to GIK. I'm sure you've all heard of them, or GIK, some people call them. They supply acoustic panels. Some of them are a little more room friendly with the scatter plates and stuff. Obviously, primarily they're studio damping pieces of equipment. But I just promised them that I'll just talk about them very, very briefly. We obviously needed to damp this room down a little bit, and Scott's touched on some of the kind of acoustics involved in speaker placements, and that's the most important thing really. Where you put your speakers in relation to the wall, obviously dominates the kind of the gain that you're getting from the wall, and so that's something that you really need to spend some time thinking about. But obviously, we appreciate, and GIK obviously appreciate that you can't just put your speakers in the best place all the time. So you are going to need, sometimes to tune your room a little, or indeed with these sorts of speakers, you can tune the sort of damping that's inside the speakers to try and affect that response a little. The main things that affect sound in your room are the speaker boundary interference response, and that is essentially where it is in relation to the wall and the gain that we're getting from it. Obviously, if it's against one corner, we're going to get some gain from it. If it's right into the corner and we've got all of the surfaces all joining each other, obviously we're getting even more reflection. We're going to get even more gain. So that's the first thing that we need to consider. The other is the dimensions of the room. Obviously, the sound waves travel along the room like this. They get to the wall and they bounce back, and obviously where they meet, they are either meeting perfectly, or they're meeting opposite, or they're meeting up points along that way. But obviously we either get reinforcement, or we get complete cancellation, or sort of bits thereof. And obviously where in the room that happens at different places. So if you've got your sound source here and you've got your the seat that you sit in here, obviously the reinforcement or the losses that you're going to get here are different than they're going to be here. And obviously as frequency goes up or down, obviously those wavelengths change, and so where those frequencies cross over is going to happen somewhere else in the room. So we might get a null here, which is a loss at say 40 Hertz, 3 dB loss here, but we might have a 6 dB gain here at 65 Hertz. So these are things that we need to work out. Where's best to place our speakers, and where's best to place our chair in relation to those speakers. So they're all things that we can do with simple measurement techniques. We don't need a proper measurement microphone, just a microphone that we can move around and that we can see a response on. Something like Room EQ Wizard is very, very handy. Or we can play various tones. If you download from the internet or use a tone generator to generate tones that are say 10 Hertz apart, when you move up and down around your room, you'll find that in some parts of the room you can't hear that frequency. In some parts of the room it's going to be massively louder, and so it's good to get yourself a piece of paper and just plot on a piece of paper where in the room those frequencies are doing different things, and find a point that on average is the best. We're not getting too many nulls, we're not getting too much reinforcement, and that's always going to be the better place to sit. Normally, Scott talked about golden ratios earlier. So sitting. So if you've got a room length and you've got your speakers back against the wall, sitting sort of 35-40% into the room, or 35 to 40% away from the back wall, is around about an average where we're going to get the least lulls or the kind of least reinforcement. So that's something to think about. So where these things come in is to try and help you sort out those little bits and pieces to make it a bit less of a problem. So these corner traps, they're just big bass traps. Obviously, bass, well, people talk about it collecting in the corner. It doesn't really collect in the corner, but that's at the point, obviously, where the waves bouncing off that wall and the ceiling and the floor all kind of group together and then bounce back out again. So if we can do something to affect where they all group together, then we can reduce the amount that bounces back out into the rooms. So these corner traps are designed to do that. So they work down to about 65 hertz, something like that. So not really low, but low enough in most rooms. To get lower, obviously we need to increase the size that those bass traps are. Because obviously the amount of bass that they kind of trap is proportional to the wavelength. So obviously we can't practically make those bigger and bigger. So that's kind of a reasonable size. We also have these soffits as well. Now in a studio, you would find that around the wall they would actually have a shelf, yay big, all the way around the outside of the space, and they would have these soffits all the way around. And obviously they do the same thing. They soak up the bass that bounces across the ceiling and up the walls. And you would also have these bass traps in the corners as well. These bass traps have also got these scatter plates on. Now what scatter plates do is that they're affecting at a higher frequency from sort of 300 hertz up to about 600 hertz, and they're just scattering those frequencies that hit them rather than absorbing them. They're sending them off in different directions rather than having a one path that they bounce into and back out of. They're sending them off, and hopefully because they're going off in all different directions, they're affecting each other much less as they then bounce and interact with each other. They're all at much smaller amplitudes because they've gone off in lots of different directions. So you're getting lots of cancellation paths, but at smaller amplitudes. So hopefully that kind of helps that. The other thing that we need to worry about is the what we call the first reflection points. So Mark, just behind you. There's a mirror just down there.
Yeah, I'll go.
And this is probably the best trick you can do at home to help you with your sound. Now, despite the fact that we all would really like our sound to be able to sound good in more than our one hotspot, I'm sure we all have our preferred place that we like to sit in the sofa, and we always make sure that the wife sits over there and the kids sit over there or on the sofa, because that's where we sit, that's where it sounds best. Right. So really worrying about just us. Do you want to just sit there a minute, Jason? Yeah. Well, we'll pretend Jason's sitting in the hotspot. We'll also pretend to just move this out of the way. The good.
So they're sitting in the same room with you then?
No, we're not.
Right. So we'll assume for this demonstration that there's a solid wall here. So what we need to do is move the mirror flat to the solid wall, along the wall, until Jason can see a reflection of the speaker. Yeah. Right. So what we do is we'll put this in. We put something there that can soak up that first reflection. So that's obviously not very thick, that's just doing your higher frequencies, but that's all we're really worried about. Higher frequencies, obviously, they're coming out at a direct path and hitting that and directly coming back to you. They're not radiating in this spherical pattern quite so much. So we can afford to just have thinner stuff, we don't need to have great big bass traps. And we continue along the wall with our mirror until we see a reflection of that speaker over there.
There you go.
Lovely. Hold that a minute.
This is where you might need a bit of help from the good lady. Obviously, she may not be too keen on all this big black panel stuff, but I think the equivalents can be. You can do stuff with your soft furnishing. It's a bit of negotiation. So if she won't go for the panel, then I'm sure Stefan and the guys have come up with.
Yeah, I mean, scattering works well as well. So you could just have a bookcase there with some larger books, some smaller books, whatever. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So there are ways and means just to, creativity.
But the idea of having the sort of reflections and positioning of some kind of compensatory hardware.
Oh, it's safe to say we're all sitting generally on sofas as well, and obviously, the sofa's made out of, felt wool, you know, foam, Dacron, and it's a great big bass absorber sat at the back of the room generally, so it's you know,
Curtains,
not too
soft
bad.
furnishings,
Curtains, yeah, that's it. It's always good. So, you know, a
But it
lot
has
of
to
us
be
have got the
said.
speakers there and then a great big window there.
Yeah.
Just close the curtains, make sure it's got some heavy felt backing.
But it has to be said what the lads have produced with these
Oh, they're
is the crazy irony is the number of people you see who very lucky people who've actually created their own listening room.
Oh, yeah.
And they haven't treated it in any way, shape or form. It's not a family room. They spent 50,000 on equipment and they haven't
That's crazy.
got anywhere.
Yeah, that's mad.
Because they've not been
So what's nice,
considering
obviously GIK have sent me their stuff, you know, that would normally be used in the studio, and a lot of it's freestanding. But they also do these panels which the material is printable on, so you can send them a JPEG of your family looking all nice, and you know, they'll make you a nice canvas that you can stick on your wall with your family on it, but with the control stuff behind it.
For your wife.
Yeah.
Exactly. She would never know. You see?
Cancel them
Yeah,
all.
never know. I mean, it's difficult when you've got one there and then you want to see you've got one there. And this is the rub
You've got to wait
when
till
you've got a
Christmas.
cloud one on the ceiling.
Yeah, it's essential. It's art, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
There's actually a lad on one of the front
Exactly.
threads on DIY Audio a few days ago, I noticed, that was trying to decide how much the weight of the stuffing he needed in the front part, because he was using one of Mark's drivers and they need a little bit of damping, probably on 3 days, this is the larger one. They'll need a little bit of damping down the front part and directly under the driver. He's trying, how do I weigh this? The wife's birthday is coming up. She'd like a new set of digital kitchen scales.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So essentially what this comes down to is to try and remove some of the effects of the room. These are some of the most important effects of the room, the reflections, and this would also be a first reflection point as well. If we brought the speaker along here, we would see what we're looking for is the back edge of the speaker, so we're trying to get rid of, you know, what's wrapping around the speaker.
So that's on the mirror reflection again from that back wall.
Exactly. Yeah. So what all this is doing is increasing our stereo image perception, really, because we've no longer got this direct path from me to you and path that's then interacting and cancelling or reinforcing or whatever. So hopefully what happens is we get a sort of a flatter frequency response here, or the frequency response at least that the speaker was creating here, and we're not getting all of these paths interacting with it, and things just snap into focus, you know, much more. Yeah.
Some people, thanks to everybody, some people do like the aficionados like us, and we have man caves. It's brilliant, this stuff, fab, you know. But of course, for many of us, we can't. And we do sort of get used to, shall we say, surround sound. You know, it is a sort of natural inclination. So with a bit of deft touch, a few nice panels from these guys, you might be able to get a sort of reasonable compromise. You won't get it perfect, but you can with a bit of negotiation. You know, do something about improving the sound.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even, you know, if you're not using these, obviously you can think about the positioning of your furniture, or if you've got a hard floor, where's best to put your rugs, and you know.
System. It's all part
Yeah,
of the system.
a holistic approach. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and this is one of the things that you know, us guys want to try and push forward a little bit. Really, is that yes, you can go and pick up a 10 grand speaker from ATC or whatever, but they're not thinking about your room. They're not thinking about where it's positioned in your room, and just a bit more of a leap and a little bit more education. You can all think about it in a holistic way and end up with stuff which is much better than just buying stuff because somebody on the forum said it was good.
Improving your sound 2-3-fold just by these little hints and tips, rather than spending 3, 10, 5, 7,000 pounds on expensive.
If there's nothing else that you do, it's worth looking at something like George Cardas's room setup guide, which, for whether you like his products or not, it's and he's done it all based on golden ratio. It does actually work quite well, even if you can't sort of treat the room significantly.